that are not recorded for people that aren't able to make it tonight. And I know some of you are on co-sponsor teams that might have members that want to watch this. So we're going to go ahead and record that for them. And then we can share that later. My name is Jenny Tatum. I'm the Director of Volunteer Engagement at LSS. And I know I've gotten the chance to talk to many of you and just really welcome and thank you for learning tonight and wanting to help your refugee placements and matches that you're working with even more than you already do. So tonight I have the great pleasure to introduce Renee Weiss, who has been a longtime volunteer of Lutheran Social Services and is currently a teacher of English through the Area Agency on Aging through their Mosaic program, which is teaching older adult refugees English and other skills. And so she's here tonight to really answer some questions that you guys sent in. And if you have others throughout the evening, she can address those, but really just talking about some general tips and techniques around how to bring in English learning to refugees when you're meeting with them. And I just can't wait to learn from her myself. I personally volunteer with refugees and teach English, and I'm also here to learn. So without further ado, we'll let you take it away, Renee.
Thank you so much, Jenny. And greetings, good evening to everyone. And thank you for thank you for taking time to talk and to learn. And I'm very interested in hearing what you've been doing in your tutoring and mentoring experiences. And thank you, Jenny, for organizing this and creating the opportunities for your volunteers to mentor and work with refugees. The time for doing this now, it's always urgent, but in our current situation, it's even more so. So I just want to thank everyone for all the work that you're doing. And yes, my name is Renee, and although I've been, had many, many years of experience in terms of teaching and curriculum and tutoring and authoring books, I will tell you that I'm still on a learning curve in terms of working with refugees and specifically elder refugees, which is not a population that I had any experience working with before. So I've learned a lot along the way about some effective strategies and ways to be more comfortable in this process of working with, particularly working one-on-one, which is different from, as you know, a classroom situation or even a small group or two people. So when I was thinking about the title for, yeah, okay. And what I definitely want to, provide some time at the end of the presentation. I want to hear what you've been doing, and if, of course, if you questions, comments, we'll definitely have time for that. If something urgent comes up, you can put it in the chat, and I'll try to respond,
Oh,
immediately.
yeah. Can we put something in the chat?
I don't know. You know how?
And and it sounds like one person is on. We can hear you, Sandy. So if you want,
That's Sandy.
Can hear you, Sandy.
if
Yeah.
you want to mute,
If you
it's
want to mute right now, and then you can jump in, later on, or put your questions in the chat. Okay, so when I was deciding how to title this presentation, I came up with Tutor 411. And that's a title that I've used before in many presentations. And I'm assuming that you understand what 411 means. Okay, that's my dog. I may have to leave the presentation for 30 seconds if he goes out of his mind. I do have a dog with early dementia stages. So, okay, having said that, Tutor 411. And my daughter came up to me and she said, Mom, what's this 411? What does that mean? And I'm like, give me the information. She says, nobody uses that term anymore, 411. It's give me the deets. So I said, okay, I'll call it give me the deets. Tips and techniques for teaching adult language learners. Okay, hang on one second. I'm going to let him out and I'll come right back and you can ponder the term 411 versus give me the deets.
okay.
Sorry about this. Go on. Okay, sorry about that. I'm back.
And you just let me know when you'd like me to change the slides, Renee. And
Okay,
I'll-
okay. So this underscores, I think, an important part of thinking about language. You know, the English language, it's not static. It's always evolving, ever changing. And the changes in language are reflective of our societal norms and changes in technology and generational changes. So I think it's interesting to think about the fact that, you know, when you're thinking about what do you want to teach, what do you want to work on, that our vocabulary and our language instruction should be based on frequent words, what's commonly used, not necessarily the King's English, okay? It leads us to the first question of what are you actually doing? And how do you choose what you're going to work on with should we use the word learner or students? I was thinking about this. It's so natural for me to talk about the tutors and students. But when you're referring, are you using is it your mentee? Is it your first friend? Is it your student, or do you use the word learner? How do you envision your relationship? Jenny, what would you say to that?
If I'm answering, I would say it really depends on the person's position. So the title is different depending on their placement. Often, if we are placing a volunteer with one other person, they'll be called a first friend or a mentor. If they are on a team, they're usually a co-sponsor. And then there's a few different terms in between. So if people want to share the term they prefer, you can put it in the chat. But there's a lot of different words depending on if they serve alone or with a team.
And how do you refer to the person that you're working with? Do you say student or learner or mentee?
Usually it's a mentee if it's a one-on-one.
A
And then
mentee,
it's
okay.
usually a refugee match or the refugee family.
Okay, I'll try and stick with mentee, but probably student's going to slip out a little bit.
Yeah, that's okay.
So regardless of the relationship, you want to think about teaching in a teaching situation. You want to teach words that are very frequent in spoken English. You want to teach words that are frequent and commonly used in written language. You want to certainly teach words, vocabulary, and provide instruction that your mentees they ask you and they want to learn about. And you want to help your learners, give them strategies so they can understand what they're hearing and they have the ability to ask for clarification or to interact with the other person they're speaking with and let them know that they need to repeat or speak more slowly. And these are actually skills that our mentees really appreciate and need to know about. Okay, next slide.
Okay.
So that's a little picture of Mother Teresa. And I know it's I can barely read the print, but it's do not wait for leaders, do it alone, person to person. And that really typifies, I think, what we're all trying to do. So I have the definition of a tutor, just so you can think about it. It's a noun and also a verb, a person charged with the instruction and guidance of another. And the verb use would be to teach or guide, usually in a specific subject or for a specific purpose. So it's essentially, it can be a very intimate relationship, I think, working with one individual. And if you're going into their home, that also adds another layer of, thinking about the relationship and how you're acting and how they're acting. And it'd be interesting for me to find out from you how long you've been working with the mentee and if you had a period of feeling maybe anxious or uncomfortable yourself going into an environment that's new for you. And also we think, you can go to the next slide, that's fine. So we think about the relationship, there's advantages and disadvantages to tutoring versus having a classroom. And as I mentioned before, working one-on-one definitely has some benefits. You can really tailor your instruction, your help to that one student. You don't have distractions of other individuals that need your attention and focus. But there are some disadvantages too, and maybe you felt this too. You have to really put on many hats. You're a teacher, a tutor, but you're also a participant in the process because you need another person to practice conversation with. So you're really having to serve many roles there, not only directly teaching to, but working with and conversing with. And you may feel that your resources are a little more limited. If you were in a classroom setting or, at the LSS offices, you could take advantage of whatever resources and materials. So we'll talk about some ways to work around that. And perhaps you already have figured out how to bring resources in to help you with your mentee. So you have to put on your detective hat, as I've said. And the first thing is that you need to determine what your mentees or learners' goals are. And the second thing is you need to determine what their prior knowledge is. We tend to make assumptions about how much or how little a student has in their memory bank and in their knowledge base. But we need to back up a little bit and find that out before you go in and start teaching, tutoring, helping. So I want to talk briefly about a needs assessment, how you can do that. And the second thing is a literacy checklist and how you can do that. Okay. So you're doing your homework basically before you even start tutoring. You're going to figure out what your student or mentee wants to learn and needs to learn. You're going to have some idea about what their strengths are and what their weaknesses are. Some students are very literate. They can read and write, but their oral skills are lacking. Or, on the other hand, they may be able to communicate and they, are more open to doing so and even forging ahead, making mistakes, but they have great difficulty in writing and reading. And you will find out their preferences. Do they want to work on conversation only? Do they want to work on their writing? And then what are their goals? The students that I've worked with are all over the age of 60. My oldest student is 93. And I've learned a lot about working with elder refugee students from my 93-year-old student who was born in Odessa. And, her goals for coming to class and learning are very different from my 62-year-old or my 59-year-old individual who was a retired cardiologist in Afghanistan and still would like to get into the workforce. And so the goals of your mentees are very varied, and you need to find out what they are. And then what are their interests? You can do a lot of your instruction in terms of helping with English is based on what do they enjoy doing? Do they like cooking? Do they like gardening? Are they looking for a job? Do they have children? So certainly you think about the kind of language that's necessary to help their kids with school and to communicate with their teachers. So these are all kind of things that we think about, and that when you do your homework, so to speak, it helps you to plan your lesson, plan what you're actually going to do. Thank you. So this may look like a big headache, and you could modify it, but what I would recommend doing, if your mentees have a beginner or above level of English, you can show this to them and ask them, are these things that you can do? For example, can you talk about your country? Can you talk about how you're feeling? Can you talk about Phoenix with a friend or a neighbor? And, and they don't have to give you a big explanation. It can be a nonverbal response, which is checking, oh yeah, no problem, I can do it. or it might be a little bit difficult. And on the other extreme, there's no way I cannot do this. And then it shows you, directs you. So, okay, so this is something we'll talk about, making small talk and what kinds of expressions and how to start a conversation with someone. Do you know how to ask for directions? Do you know how to ask someone to speak more slowly? Can you fill out a form if you go to the doctor's office, or if you're meeting with an attorney, or you're going to the bank or the library to get a library card? Are you able to fill out a form? If you have children in school, do you understand the information that's coming back from the school? Can you talk to your doctor about what is wrong? I know my students have many, many doctor's appointments, and often they're still at a stage where they really need interpreters or translators, but they want to get to a point where they can at least very simply communicate with their caregiver or the nurse or the physician. And can they understand? Do they enjoy watching TV? Can they understand what they're seeing on the news? Or I wouldn't go for watching the news 24/7, but anyway, so you can modify this. You can ask questions more simply. And again, this is to, when you find out what they can do and what they cannot do, that will help you in devising your lessons. Okay, next slide. Thank you. You may have mentees, and I certainly, it's been my experience over the past 2 years that the students, clients that we've been helping have very, very low literacy. And that can be an issue, but we have to have workarounds because we still want to find out what they can do and what they can't do. So I've devised a checklist, and again, you can modify this, but I just print it out and I sit down with my student, usually next to them, and I give them a pencil or a pen, and I just go through the list to see, are these things that they can do? Or maybe they can't do it, or maybe they can do it, but you can see they're struggling and they need some improvement in it. And again, you don't want to make this be like a test. You don't want to increase their stress level. I like doing these literacy, the checklist or the needs assessment, versus if your mentees were in a traditional class, they'd be doing a more standardized kind of pre-testing. Personally, I don't think you have to go there with that. You can gather a lot of information from using a checklist. Can they read and say the alphabet? And how would you ascertain that? Well, you come in with, I'll show you. I actually just bring in, I have my little binder, and I will show them. I don't know if you can see this. Look. Is that visual coming up? Yeah,
A little bit. Yeah, if you put it right in front of you. Yeah.
I just bring in sheet of paper that has upward lowercase, and I will have them look at it, and I will point, and all they have to do is say the letter. It's minimal, and some of the answers are nonverbal, but in this case, it's can they read the alphabet? Can they say the alphabet? Doesn't have to be A, B, C, D, E. I randomize. And again, for numeracy, numbers, can they read and say numbers? Can they form and write their letters fairly legibly? Can they write their own name? We've been working for weeks and weeks with our clients on writing their first and last name. Can they read their name aloud? Address and telephone number. This is personal information competencies that are important for everyone, really. And our students, mentees need help with this. Moving down, if it's easy for them and they're very successful with the first, couple of questions, you can move down. You can show them some simple words. You can use flashcards. I'm a big fan of the dollar store. I don't want to spend a lot of money on resources, but you can get flashcards or sight word cards, and you can just see if they can decode and read those. Check and see, can they produce speech? Another important check is how's their hearing and vision. I know working with elder clients, I was, again, the dollar store, I was constantly going and buying reading glasses. Many of them are not getting super duper or even adequate vision care. So, why do we need to figure these things out? Well, because if they're having vision or hearing issues, this impacts their learning. So again, these are all kind of things that you want to investigate and get a handle on before you actually start teaching.
Renee, there was also a question in the chat about whether you would be able to share this checklist.
Sure. I can actually send a PDF, or if you send me your email, I can just email it to you. Yeah, sure. Yes.
Thank you.
And any other questions about doing an assessment of your mentee before you actually get in there and start teaching, tutoring?
Feel free to put it in the chat or just unmute yourself and just ask Renee if you have a question about how to do
Okay,
it.
yeah, I'm looking at the chat so far. I see the message about sending the checklist, so I will do that. And again, what I'm proposing are recommendations. You have to do what you feel comfortable with. And some of your mentees may be very shy. Some are really open to telling you about their needs, their goals, and others are kind of, if you ask, how can I help you? And the answer is typically, I want to learn English. Well, that's like asking my husband at 5 o'clock, what do you want for dinner? And he comes back with food. It's not particularly helpful, So that's why we employ these little techniques to find out in a very non-stressful way what our students can do, what they can't do, and what they want to do.
So I have a question, please.
Mm-hmm.
So almost everybody that I've worked with over the past few years is has very few, if any, English words. So we've been using Google Translate on our phones, and we find that most of them have phones.
Mm-hmm.
And so, we show them how to use it if they haven't used it before.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of like our first step, because we can't be with them at every moment, but they do have to communicate with people that don't speak their language when they go out to the school or somewhere else. So I just wanted to bring that up because that's been like a lifesaver for us.
Right. Yes. And thank you for that, for reminding me that, we need to encourage our students to use whatever means is helpful. And, we are in the 21st century now. And even in the classroom situation, I tend to have my students, I don't want them to rely on Google Translate in the class situation because I want them to be thinking and processing in English. However, to your point, there are situations where you do need to communicate. And if they don't know how to use Google Translate, the fact that you're showing them and working on that with them I think is great. Yeah.
Right. Because we have to, the first interactions, they understand no English whatsoever. So that's what I've encountered. So that was the only thing that, unless we have someone like this time, we have one person in our group that speaks Spanish and we have Spanish speaking little family. So it's like, okay, but she can't come every time. So it's just really a good tool.
Yes. And part of the tutoring experience, as you spend more time with your mentees, even though you say they have very few words, very low literacy, there are techniques you can start the process of helping them to use English to pick up vocabulary and to recognize written. And again, one thing I'll touch upon later is that people learn in different ways. Some people are very auditory and they like to, even if it's a very short conversation, how are you? They like to listen to your voice. They like to repeat it. They like to repeat it again. Other learners are not so much auditory, but they're very, they really rely on, particularly if they are more literate in their first language, they process information by writing everything down. Even if it's something we're practicing a conversation, I'm saying, well, you're not going to be writing, you're going to be speaking, but they have a comfort level and it cements the vocabulary, the concept by writing it down. So yeah, there's definitely, I would say don't be deterred. There's a lot of help and a lot of resources available for the question of how do you teach someone who has very little language in English to begin with? Okay, so let's go on to the next slide if we can. Okay, so I think there's a way, if you touch that, yeah, there you go. So another interesting aspect of tutoring is to understand the literacy level of your students. And of course, you're not going to ask them, how much English do you know? Or, to Judy's point, you can tell if they're oftentimes very limited language. But I would want to touch upon, again, it will help you if you help you to devise your lessons if you know what kind of learner you have. So people talk about English as a second language. I don't really like that term because we have students who maybe speak 3 or 4 other languages, so English is not their second language. But there are what we call pre-literate learners. I have not encountered many. A pre-literate learner would be someone who there is no written language in their first language. It's all oral. And there are around the globe, there are language groups where it's all oral. Stories are handed down. There's some Australian, indigenous tribes, some other languages, but not typically. I would say that your mentees are going to fall in the category of non-literate or semi-literate. And to Judy's point, I don't know for sure, we have to talk more about it, but a non-literate learner would be someone who really has no education, has not had the ability to go to school in their home country or first country. So they, and there may not be a very established writing and reading alphabet to it. So again, non-literate relies mostly on oral communication. So most of my students fall in the semi-literate or non-alphabetic category. The semi-literate individuals are people who maybe they've gone to school for elementary, they've had some education in their first language, 3 years, 4 years, because of war or economic situations. And particularly in Muslim countries, women have not had access to education as the men have. So you can recognize the challenges of working with a semi-literate student versus a student who maybe the Roman alphabet literate would be first language could be French, Spanish, Portuguese, Italian, even Vietnamese actually uses the Roman alphabet. Many of your students are non-alphabetic, meaning if they're Chinese, for example, they do have an alphabet, but it's not based on letters, it's based on symbols or characters. So think about that if you're helping them with their reading and writing. The non-Roman alphabet literate would be your Arabic speakers, Dari, Farsi, Greek, and why do we need to think about this or talk about this? Because if your mentees want to improve their writing and their reading, there are different techniques that you can use, and just be aware of how to help them. For example, if their first language is Farsi or Dari, and you give them a pencil and you tell them to write, they may start writing from right to left because that's what their language is based on. So knowing these little, and Hebrew, Arabic all go from right to left. Some of your Asian students are going to start writing from, vertically from up to down. So knowing this helps you with a student who really very limited oral skills, very limited writing skills, but we can help them with directionality, piece of paper, forward, the top, the bottom, what direction to write in. Gets the brain into processing our language. Okay, any questions about literacy level and why we need to even think about it or talk about it? It's just interesting to me because often as an English speaker, and we don't have I did not have the knowledge of the vast array of alphabets that are utilized, around the globe. And a lot of the students get frustrated because even as their oral skills might be improving, they really do have a need for some reading and writing, and it's really hard for them if they are non-alphabetic or they have a different way of, in their first language. They have to transfer things over. Okay. So just a few questions or a few comments about diversity. I imagine you probably already know this, but I think it's always good to bring it up that, we're walking into a situation with working with people, different cultures, different values, different experiences. Do not attempt to try and change people to make them more, Americanized. It's wonderful to expose them to our culture, but it's also really good if you can, it's great actually, if you can honor and respect their culture and learn from each other. Be honest with yourself about stereotypes. All of us, regardless of how we think, we're open-minded. We all have preconceived ideas about people from different countries and different religions. So, be open to learning about this with your mentee. It's not bad to disagree with them. And it's actually, in working with students, to tell them it's okay to have an opinion and to express it. It's part of being American. Just be aware that your own feelings don't get in the way of your mentoring. And you're probably already doing this, but have a lot of fun. It's just, for me, it's like an amazing experience. I feel that I get so much more out of the experience of tutoring and teaching than my students ever do, although they tell me the opposite. So, okay. So, all right. I just want to briefly touch upon some barriers. Judy brought up, one challenge is when you have students that have very, very few words, very little language. So these definitely are, I don't want to say problems, they're challenges and barriers to your students, your mentees progressing. Low level of literacy in their primary language, low level of communicative and numeracy concepts, lack of fluency and accuracy in language, even when they're gaining some oral skills, their language often sounds stilted. They may be embarrassed about their pronunciation, their affect, their intonation. And so these are things to be aware of, and there are workarounds for that too. Age, which is something that I didn't think about until I had a class of solely elder refugee clients. Age in itself is not a barrier, as we know, but there are physical and mental issues that come up as we age and that affect learning. Physical issues, everything from, I have clients, if they have arthritis or Parkinson's, it's going to be more difficult for them writing, and sometimes they get frustrated with that. I have clients who have vision issues, and they get frustrated sometimes with that, but there's workarounds for that. We can meet these challenges. For example, with vision, I find that when you're working with refugees and mentees, anything you give them to look at, make sure it's at least a 14-point font. And don't give them material that has a whole bunch of different scripts. I personally would avoid script. I would just focus on handwriting. There are other physical issues. Even mobility comes into play, probably more so in the classroom setting, because a lot of the activities, if your learners are kinesthetic, you want them moving around, and there are some mobility issues that are barriers to that. Stress, I'm sure you've encountered working with your mentees. And listen, we all have a lot of stress in our daily lives. Our refugees have been through very traumatic experiences, and they are dealing with both acute and chronic stress, and that are due to just the whole resettlement process and daily life. And these stresses impact learning. Oftentimes they'll go, oh, I can't get it into my head. So there's a lot we can do in just helping our mentees to relax and that to reduce stress. Two things I can think of right away are I always do breathing exercises before I start a lesson. We often forget to breathe. I teach them to check their pulse. They can see that their pulse is going down a little bit. Sometimes we'll do some chair yoga, some stretching, particularly if you're talking, if you're working on health vocabulary, it just kind of ties into that. So these are how you can meet the challenges of some physical issues that come up that affect learning. And then, of course, there's the I'm calling them mental challenges. Many of our elder refugee clients have significant issues with memory loss, retention of information, processing information. Students who maybe have not been diagnosed with early onset Alzheimer's or dementia, but as a teacher, as a tutor, you pick up, especially if you're working long-term, you can pick up on some of these issues. So just to be aware that all of these physical and mental states affect our mentees' ability to learn.
Nothing from Martin today, except I saw that he put something on Facebook.
Pardon me? I heard something on Facebook.
I'm so sorry. That was me, Mary Beth. I just came from Mohs surgery. I'll put myself on mute.
Oh, hi, Mary Beth. I'm having Mohs surgery next week, so I feel your pain. Okay, let's move along. No problem. So, basic strategies, whatever you're working on with your student, review, review, review. Don't feel that you have to provide new material or new instruction. Keep your language simple and think about including all 4 skills in your lesson. When you're sitting down with your mentee, you want to do a little bit of listening, a little bit of speaking, a little bit of reading, a little bit of writing. And then I did put down teach phonics. I always get a lot of questions about pronunciation. In fact, Jenny told me that one of the volunteers had a question about what do you do when students are speaking and their pronunciation is off, and you try and help them correct it, but they can't seem to do it and they get frustrated. There's not enough time in the next 4 months to talk about pronunciation and phonemic awareness and phonics. I never actually, in my experience of ESL teaching, taught phonics. It wasn't something that in my academic education would say was frowned upon, but it was something that elementary kids learned how to do, but not so much adults. I'm coming around to realize that, particularly with your very low-level learners, it is fun, it's engaging, and it's necessary to work on pronunciation / phonics. And there's many, many materials. I can send you some links or some sites where you can get some ideas on how to actually do that. But it's a very it's an important part of the learning experience, and it will help your students feel more confident. And it certainly helps with decoding for reading, decoding words, and understanding why we say the things we say. Oftentimes, just resorting to tell my English is I just go like this, and we know, teacher, it's a crazy language. So I would recommend, particularly with your low literacy students, that you investigate including some phonics in there, which also is, and practicing intonation and stress. Oftentimes, students are very robotic in their, particularly if they're first learning, they're hesitant and they tend to have a very flat affect. And so again, we want to model natural vocabulary, not speak very slowly. You don't have, or not speak very loudly like they're deaf and they don't understand you. But I would slow it down a little bit. I tend to speak a little more rapidly because I'm from New York, and my students, they get to understand that we all have different accents. Personally, I have students who've asked for accent reduction. They don't want to sound like they're a Dari speaker or a Vietnamese speaker. And, personally, I'm not a fan of accent reduction. I encourage them to just, that everyone speaks. We have many, many different dialects and accents in this country. And the goal is to understand and to be understood. So you want to go for comprehensible, not perfect pronunciation. Okay. Oh, I see we're moving on. I want to leave a room for questions because that's how I think we'll get to the nitty-gritty of things, hopefully.
And also, Renee, there was a
Mhm.
question in the chat about whether you have phonics resources you can share.
Yes, yes, yes. I'll just briefly tell you that I had to teach myself how to teach phonics because it wasn't something that I really knew how to do. For me, the best resource is the Minnesota Literacy Council, and I'll send you the link. They have once a month, they have free teacher tutor training. You can do it on Zoom. I've learned so much about teaching phonics, teaching reading, teaching vocabulary. They're so expert. They also have published a curriculum for everything from pre-literacy up to. It used to be actually free, and Lutheran Social Services actually had purchased back in the day some materials. You do have to pay for some of the resources, but a lot of the material is free. And I'll send the link to Minnesota Literacy. Other phonic resources. There's a lot on the internet, but you have to take the time and kind of sort through it. What I found is that a lot of it is British English. We don't want to go there. We don't need to go there. And so if you like, I can send you some of the sites on YouTube that I found very useful. The students enjoy them for especially because you need to bring other voices into your tutoring situation. You want them to be, if you're working on speaking and communication, you want them to hear other speakers. And you could do that if you have an iPad or laptop. I would really encourage you to bring that. Most of your students have phones, and there's a lot that they can do. A lot of them use WhatsApp for communication, and you can show them how to access some very easy videos that are on YouTube that are specifically for phonics, pronunciation, and for speaking.
Renee, are you familiar with ABC English program?
Yes,
So
yes.
can you
The
talk a little
ABC
bit?
English was actually published from the Minnesota Literacy, and they have since gotten rid of it because they felt, been around for a while and it didn't meet the current competencies and standards. But yes, and if you still have copies of that hanging out at LSS, it would be great. Yes, I am familiar with the
I
ABC.
do believe that there's actually a team that's utilizing it online.
Oh,
And
okay.
so I think it's still current. And Jill, feel free to mention any other info.
Yes.
I
It's
do
kind
think
of,
it's
yeah,
something
go ahead.
people have found helpful. So if you have, so you have used it before and found it helpful?
I have, and I believe that what Minnesota Literacy did was the ABC program, a lot of that they were putting out for free, and they've reimagined it and revamped it, and it's now called English Unlocked. And there's actually 5 different levels, and there are some things that you can get for free, but a lot of it has to be purchased.
We use ABC English for our groups and it's fantastic. It's
Yeah.
$20 every 3 months.
How much is it?
$25 every 3 months.
Okay, and you have access to the whole program?
It's online.
It's online. Okay.
I mean, you can buy the books, but you don't need to. And it's great because they don't have to be literate at all. And it doesn't matter what language.
Yes, I agree. Yes. Okay. Let me see what else I want to touch upon. Okay, next we can finish up and then I want to talk to everybody and see what questions you have. Okay, so we're done with basic strategies. I just put down my own top 10 tips. Is probably like 50,000 tips, but I would set up a structure for your tutoring session. Many of you, if you're experienced tutors, you're already doing this. And by structure, I mean not a full-fledged on lesson plan, but before you go into your session, have a structure in your mind. I would write it down of what you want to accomplish. What is your objective for that class? And I'll show you a format that I've used, but there, again, you could see online, there's many different ways if you want to write down a lesson plan, how you can structure that. Use appropriate and authentic materials. We talked about the ABC English. There are so many materials that are available for free, on the internet, but I find a lot of them are really not specifically for adults. They're for elementary and secondary students. So I would, pick and choose, seek out materials that are, racially and culturally sensitive and appropriate. And whenever possible, just use, the term is realia. For example, if you're talking about, food and shopping, I would, bring in some flyers from Safeway and Fry's and just plenty of visuals on there. And we spend a lot of time with numeracy talking about, money and also and food and pricing. And so there's a lot of vocabulary that can come out of just bringing an authentic material. I brought in applications for a library card. And once your mentees get a library card, you can show them how to access, the virtual library materials. There's particularly Burton Barr has materials in many different languages. And the jury for me is out on programs like Rosetta Stone. I know there are programs out there in the community. Abounding Service uses Rosetta Stone virtually and also in their program. I'm not a big fan. However, it works for a lot of students. And if they have a library card, they can download the Rosetta Stone. You can work on it with them. You can download it and, you can have it for 3 weeks, and then you can bring it back and renew it. But anyway, point is, I would encourage them, authentic materials. I would encourage them to get a library card, help them to fill out a form for their library card. One of the few great resources that we have left in the community that is free. Focus on relevant themes and topics. So personal information, clothing, housing. I know the ABC English their concept also is teaching through thematic units. I would spend not just one session, but multiple sessions. Pick on, again, once you find out what they want to learn about, you can, select that topic and just review material and keep on that theme or topic for at least several weeks. Set realistic goals and make it fun. Oftentimes the students themselves are frustrated about what they see, what they call their lack of progress. But, using the checklist, you could show them, oh, now you're able to write your name. Now you know the alphabet. So, but setting goals that are short term and achievable. And of course, I know you're already doing this, give praise and reassurance. And foster independence means that give them materials and resources that they can work on when they're not with you. Because I know, your time is limited and you can only do so much. And I find many of the students, some of them who are more academically oriented, they want homework, or they want to spend some time on their own reviewing what you've worked on with them. Okay, we're almost at the end of what I have. Keep going, Jenny. Don't teach too much language in one session. I always tend to, well, it's always, but one of my minor flaws is I always am over ambitious in what I think I can accomplish or do. And so I tend to want to, I teach too much, and then you can see the glazed expression comes over their faces. Don't try and teach all the meaning of a piece of language. There's many high frequency words. For example, even the word, make a mistake, make the bed. So teach the words in the context of the language competency or life skill that you're working on with your student. Modify your speech. We talked about that. Not too fast, not too slow, not too loud. And you'll be able to see, you'll get the feedback from their eye contact and their expressions if they're getting it. What you don't want to do is say, do you understand? Because you're going to get the answer yes, or yes, teacher. Check for comprehension is critical. And again, it's not saying, do you understand that, or did you get that? But it's some very sneaky ways when you're tutoring of finding out if they actually understand the task and they understand the vocabulary. We don't have the time. I could do a whole workshop on focused listening and comprehension checks, but you may have had experience with this, and maybe you can share with me what ways you have to figure out if your mentees actually understand what you're saying. So, and finally, stimulate language in multiple ways. Again, some people are very kinesthetic. They like to, move pictures around. They learn by doing. And that's why I think bringing in flashcards and other manipulatives, if you're working on the alphabet, a piece of paper with letters on them is okay, but you can do a lot more with actually having tiles or Scrabble tiles or magnetic tiles, and have them move things around in creating words. My students, clients who could not write and were just learning the alphabet, I actually would bring in like Jello, and I would have them trace letters, do it kinesthetically, trace letters in the Jello. And then we'd go from the Jello to maybe, finger, or do it in the air, and provide numbers with the letters so they could see this is how you write an R. The up, the down, the curve. So there's many ways that you can work with kinesthetic learners, and then also auditory learners, using videos. I can also give you links to a couple of more traditional programs. Both Cambridge University Press and Oxford University Press have excellent resources for language learners of all levels. I'm not going to promote the books because I wrote some of them myself, but many of you are familiar with the Oxford Picture Dictionary program. See if I can get that in the screen. OxfordOUP.com, and then also Cambridge University Press has a program called Ventures. There is a free online educational program called Ventures Arcade that my students just love working on, and it's 5 levels. And you could show them, they can do it on their phone, you could do it together with them, better on a larger screen. So that is for learners who are more auditory. And there are multiple other ways. I think you have the flexibility, perhaps of, instead of teaching about, things in the market, if you're able to go with your mentee to the market, there's a wide variety of lessons that you could do at the dollar store, at the library, at the market. So yeah, it's really enlarging their scope of learning through actual authentic experiences. Okay. And then some students, with multiple ways of learning, some students really are like, particularly if you have mentees with a higher level of education in their first language. I know many of the Cubans, the Venezuelans. I have some Ukrainian students, Russian students, some have completed university. And so learning another language, they think in terms of the structure and form of language. And they very much enjoy breaking down vocabulary. So we've done some work with flashcards and with homonyms. They're always asking me, break and break. I take a coffee break, and I'm in my car and I have to break. And why do we spell it two different ways? And eight and eight. Another reason, actually, ABC English does a good job at breaking down the phonics because, as we know, in our alphabet, one letter could have 7 different sounds. So if you're, working on oral skills, it's good to teach them how to decode the sounds that correspond to particular letters. Okay, we're at the end. I just have a slide about what's in your bag, and maybe you could make some suggestions, some additional suggestions, but these are just some supplies that in your goodie bag that you bring that I think are appropriate and, necessary. Pencils, I actually found that my students who have arthritis or some other difficulty, or they haven't really had a lot of experience with writing, they do better with a thicker pencil. And you can buy either online or a Lakeshore. They have these, actually, they're called learner pencils. Or make sure that they have a grip on their pencil. Highlighters, Sharpies. In terms of working with reading and writing, I think what works much better than paper and pencil is to, again, I get them at the dollar store or other places, to use the erasable, boards and dry erase markers. You can do dictation. They can practice their writing. Even better is to use, I think they're called like the magic board, like the Etch-a-Sketch, that you write something and then erase it. I actually convinced my program to purchase these magic boards because for the clients who are preparing for their citizenship, the examination used to be paper and pencil, but it's now all digital, and they have to know how to use a stylus and to be comfortable writing with the stylus. So having those magic boards simulate what they would be doing taking their examination. Flashcards, Scrabble tiles, for students who want to create their own vocabulary, their own dictionary. This is a fun activity, particularly if you've reviewed words and to cement it in their mind. I give them a bunch of index cards and I put them on a ring. And as you're going through your lessons, they write down the target vocabulary that they want to remember and learn. And it could be for a lower level learner. Sometimes we'll go through magazines and cut out pictures, or they'll draw a picture, or they'll put down the word in their language, if they have literacy in their language. And at the end of, a couple of months, they have their own dictionary that they can, just kind of take with them that's personalized for them. And then, we talked about using a laptop and tablet. I have incorporated some digital literacy skills in working. It's very necessary. And even if you're working on the alphabet, if you look at the keyboard, it's not A, B, C, D. There's a name for that. I forget what it is. The way the letters are organized on our keyboards. And that's how I actually pre-test them, is that if they can recognize the letters. I don't do an ABCD. I have them open up a tablet or keyboard and, look at it that way. Okay, what's in your bag? And maybe you have some other suggestions of things that you have brought in that have been successful. I don't think we need to take time of going through, but I did put up a sample, like what I would do with my mentee, creating a sample lesson. Let's say we're talking about food, which is a topic that everyone is interested in. I put down, before I go in for the session, I'll write down, what my objective is, what we're going to work on. In this case, it was identifying common food words, to make a shopping list. The beauty is, if you're in a classroom, you have to use either plastic fruit or pictures. If you're in their home, and if they're open and willing to it, your language learning involves going into their kitchen and opening up the refrigerator and seeing what's in there. And that's how you begin to have a conversation about, what's this, what's that. The grammar, get a lot of questions about, how do I teach grammar? Should I teach grammar? I feel very strongly that the grammar is integrated into the competencies, the 4 skills. So there are certain grammar points that seem to naturally go together with what you're talking. Like, for example, if you're talking about health or healthcare, you should take aspirin. If you have a headache, you should lie down and rest. Could, should, would. These are modal verbs, but I would never teach, okay, today we're going to talk about the word should, or we're going to talk about modal verbs. We just talk about going to the doctor, or how are you feeling? What's the matter? If you're talking about shopping, going to the market, there's very common frequent language. I need, I don't need, I have, I don't have. If you're practicing directions, where are the, aisle 4, aisle 3. So your grammar just flows out from the life skill competencies that you're working with. I hope that makes sense. So you go from introducing some vocabulary, and then you practice it in a variety of methods. Could be dictation, could be a listen and repeat, could be a pointing to pictures. For higher level students, you could practice a dialogue or a conversation. And after you presented, then the practice part of it is actually the more interactive. Again, it's the dialogue, it's the conversation. For your students who want to do, worksheet, there's everything from word searches to crossword puzzles to matching activities. And the final step of that is, I think about the application. How are they going to translate what you're working on to an actual real life in their day-to-day life? So if you're talking about food, and then you help them to make up a shopping list, could be 4 words or 5 words. That's the application of the vocabulary that you've introduced and are practicing. And then finally, the phonics. I don't think it has to be integrated. Sometimes I'll just, with lower level, I'll go down, I'll start with the consonants. I don't start with A because it's a bear. But for example, if you're talking about food, then what comes naturally from that are a lot of CH words. So I put down, okay, let's take a look at what's in your refrigerator. Do you have chicken? Do you have coffee? Do you have cheese? And then they could write a few words, identify, and they're picking out the words that have that C. This is phonics, that CH, that sh versus th. And that's always fun and enjoyable. But again, the lexicon, the vocabulary is connected to what we're talking about. Thank you, my Dakshin. Okay, I think we're about coming to the end. Yeah. So I always have this, I have it on my desk and it's in my head. I'm going to tone down the noise, excuse me a minute. This brings me to the point of a teaching environment. You want to minimize distractions if you can. You want to have good lighting. You want to minimize distractions. Sometimes you can't avoid it if you know it's a family and you have kids running around. But yeah, this is a barrier to communication. My dog. Okay. Helping one person might not change the world, but it could change the world for one person. And I really believe that that is what you're doing in a tutoring situation. It's a good thing. Okay. Next slide, Jenny. Okay.
I want to hear the answer to Jan's question. Jan, do you want to read it?
How do Jan, I'm fairly conversational in Spanish.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm going to quickly take a look. I'm fairly conversational, have a Spanish speaking student. It's better to go cold turkey and not interject Spanish. I feel like I cheat all the time. It saves time. Okay. I'm not sure if the student doesn't get lazy knowing I can understand her in Spanish. What's the theory? That's a really interesting question. And I think, you know, academics and TESOL people would have a different answer than I would. Because in my decades of ESL instruction in a classroom with multi levels and also multi-ethnic groups and about 10 different languages in one class, did not have the luxury of translating or, you know, we were taught to strictly teach in English and even with the beginning levels. And we were actually advised to discourage. They used to call it a first language interference was the term, I believe. I've come around in my in my decades of experience that, you know, what works for people, I would not feel like you're cheating. I don't feel like it's a crutch. I think it's a comfort level. Your student knows that you do know a little Spanish and you can help them out. There are situations where even as the tutor, you're at a loss for how to explain something. And how much easier is it just to, you know, to give them the word in Spanish, particularly with our Roman alphabet speakers. There's so much correlation in vocabulary between Spanish and English that I think if they find it helpful and comforting, and you find it's helpful, I don't see anything wrong with that. Yeah. You know, there's different theories. My theory is that that you should not be, if you do speak a little bit of the language, then and if you see that it's a higher comfort level for the student, fine. Other opinions on this or ideas or
I pretty much, if I say it in Spanish, I quickly say it in English several times. And then if she continues in Spanish, I just say, no, I don't understand you.
Mhm. Mhm.
But sometimes I'm not aware if it's been said in Spanish or English. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah.
So that's helpful. Thank you. I was feeling guilty.
No, no guilt, no stress, no guilt.
Yeah.
Like Renee said, it's kind of rare that you speak the language of a refugee. So if you can speak Spanish, that's great. And I think that's one of the more common languages here. So I think if it's helping her to understand what you're going to then teach in English, it's a good tool.
I think it's a good technique to ask your mentee to teach you some words in their language.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and it gives them.
She knows she's supposed to be teaching me. She totally knows she's supposed to be. That's our bargain. But we're here for her, you know, and I want to make sure it stays on that we're here for her English. You know, I need, you know, because sometimes I'm just not aware of how we're doing it, you know, and so I said, no, too much Spanish. We're here for you. And she says to me, well, no, in Spanish, I'm helping you too. I said, I appreciate that, but we're here for you. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And and in fact, living in California for so many years, I felt like I was learning and not so much teaching, but I was speaking Spanglish. And we actually talk about Spanglish, because it's kind of a combination of English and Spanish. It's also very joyful for me. One of the benefits, again, of having a group or a class with different languages, to have my Congolese students teaching my Ukrainian students some words, and having my Vietnamese students teaching my Russian students some words. And yeah, putting your mentee in the role of teacher is a good instructional technique. Okay, I'm looking at
Yeah, it
links.
looks like there's one more question in there, Renee, that
Yes,
we
yes.
open it up. So from Carol.
How do you know if the mentee is auditory, visual, or kinesthetic learner? Okay. Well, one way of doing that is, again, using that checklist. You see what is easy for them to do and what is problematic or difficult. If you go into a situation and whatever you're saying to them, they're opening their book and they're writing. Can you hear that first language interference? Excuse me.
We can't hear it, Renee. If I mean I can't. Can anybody else hear it? And must be her dog, but
So sorry about that.
we actually can't hear it, Renee.
You can't hear? You can't
So
hear
if
what
you
that's
don't,
going on?
so don't
Okay.
worry about
All
it.
right,
'Cause
fine.
we can't hear it.
Fine, okay. You can figure out how they learn best by what they're actually doing. Auditory, and they'll tell you if they want more conversation, they want to listen to you talking, they want to watch a video, and you see that they're getting it, then that's their comfort zone with that. That's their lean. I don't think any learner is like one or the other. I think we learn in multiple ways. You also can, based on their literacy in their first language, if they have not had a lot of education, have not been to school, and or if their language is a not non-Roman based, they're probably going to be more of an auditory or kinesthetic learner, because they haven't had a lot of experience in processing, the writing, the reading. That's a whole different way of learning. I just see my students who have been to university or have higher levels, first thing they do is open up their notebook, and whatever you say, they say, can you write it? Can you write it? Can you write it on the board? They want to see the word in writing, and then it cements it. But for many other people, particularly with, again, lower literacy, that's not necessary for them. And in fact, it's just a hindrance and it slows them down. Okay, I'm looking to see any other questions.
I just want to thank you, Renee, for one thing I learned from this, which is repeat, 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 because I was just trying to move ahead.
Yeah.
And I see that's not the way to go.
Yeah, yeah. And are you meeting? It depends also. Are you meeting once a week, once a month? I mean,
We have
how often
5
is
volunteers and each one goes one day, and we're using ABC English program.
Oh, that's excellent. Okay.
But I can see I was just trying to, I finished this lesson instead of,
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think could be because there's so much that we want to do and communicate and get through. And yeah. One thing that I started doing with my elder clients was to help with, like, we talk about retention and memory. And this is even if you're not learning a language. I'm finding in my own life, I have to have, if when I park my car, I have to have a visual image of like where the car is, or I'm not going to be able to find it. in terms of vocabulary in another language, when I would start the class, I would put up 3 words on the board, not connect, like, when you go to the doctor and you have a Medicare appointment, they say, okay, apple, cherry, whatever. I do that every class session, and they're typically 3, they're not connected words, but the words that we have learned about or talked about. And I just put them on the board, and then I erase them. And then at the end of the class, I'll say, what were those 3 words again? And again, it's just another way of cementing. And for higher level, it could be a dialogue, and you just erase part of it, Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for that. There's so much to talk about and so much to discuss. And I will communicate with Jenny. I mean, I'll give her some reference lists. But it sounds like you're just forging ahead and doing great work. And I'm sure your mentees really appreciate it. You don't have to be an expert. And in fact, I think in training volunteers, I think I had the hardest time working with like retired teachers. I think it's almost better if you're not a teacher, because you have all these preconceived notions about how learners learn and what's the right way to do things. And sometimes that gets in the way when it's a second language learner, So teaching English is not the same as teaching English as a second or third language.
We have about 10 more minutes, so if anybody has another question, we still have time.
It's a quiet group.
I loved your idea, Renee, about the flashcard pictures that you can make. I think that's a really good idea. Some of the other ones that I've used that I'll just share. I've done flashcards on objects in the home so that they can kind of be around those words and see them. I also, about when you were talking about the Fry's ads and looking at the food and those items, is then turn it into a couple of back and forth questions like, do you want to buy this? Or I don't know, how much does this cost? Or asking a question about the item. And that's how I test the comprehension. So sometimes I'll ask a question and I say, your turn, now you ask a question. And it doesn't have to be about anything that I just asked, but it's about something in this picture. Ask a question. Another one that I'll do is I'll find a picture online, whether it's a picnic scene or a beach scene or a forest. And it's almost like Guess Who, where you're describing, once you've learned colors, you've learned how to describe adjectives about people, is I will find someone in the picture and I'll say, this girl is wearing pink, or this boy has a cat. And then they have to find in the picture who I'm describing. And then they have to describe. And so even if they don't have the grammar right, they can describe something in the picture using a color, a person, an animal, a size, big, old, large, something like that. So it's a good way to use adjectives. And then it's like a seek and find game, memory card games, phrases in each language that you repeat every time. So they get used to when you walk in the home. Every time you come in, you say, hello, how are you today? I am good. Even if it's just like the same kind of sentence that they get used to saying, and then you can pick a couple phrases in their language to also kind of understand how hard it is to remember those phrases. But you can kind of have a back and forth at the beginning and the end when you say goodbye, that you say in their language and they say in yours. Those are just a couple of ideas.
Yeah. And, we didn't have time. I didn't really talk a lot about checking comprehension or how to give multiple exposures to, when we talk about, okay, teaching a word or introducing language, not only do you have to review, but you have to provide multiple exposures. For example, your idea, let's say you want to talk about, you're talking about a birthday party and talk about celebrating. You have a picture of people sitting around celebrating someone's birthday, it's a grandfather, family, whatever. you start, and your students they don't have a lot of vocabulary, they see what they're seeing, they know what they're looking at, but they can't communicate it, they can't talk about it yet. So you always start off with what I call non-verbal silent drill. You could say, point to the man. They don't have to produce language at that point. They're at that time. But you're finding out what they already know. Point to the man, point to the birthday cake. Then the next level is this you point and you say, is this a man? They still do not have to produce language. They can do a thumbs up, thumbs down, or they can say yes or no. The next exposure, the next level from that would be requiring a small amount of communication from them. And that's a yes/no question. Is this a man? Is this a birthday cake? Is that a chair? And their response is, yes, it is, no, it isn't. You're pointing. Is that a chair or a table? Is he the grandfather or the mother? And then they're going to come up with that one word. So, and then from there, you move on. So you're starting from what I call the silent drill or the silent response to giving a sentence. When is your birthday? What kind of birthday cake do you like? So, and then the response is a short answer. I like chocolate. I don't like cake. Okay. So that is a method for checking comprehension and also for giving them the skills to begin to talk in conversation in a non-stressful environment, and you're building on what skills they already have. Does that make any sense? There's actually, you can go and look at, type in focused listening, checking comprehension. There's a wealth of material, teacher resources on how to do that. So I'm just giving like the 2-minute explanation, but you can do that with any picture, any visual, anything you have that's pictorial. It could be a catalog from Target, whatever. And this is a way of introducing vocabulary and engaging them and having them start the process of speaking.
I had one thing I wanted to share. We had a family, and they could speak, in their native language, but not English.
What was their native language?
They're from Syria, which is so anyway.
So they speak Arabic.
Arabic, probably.
Maybe. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and
they write from right to left. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And we were visiting one day, and the dad had an episode, a health episode that we had to call 911. And luckily I had their phone number, their address in my phone, because I didn't know what the address was. I was, you go there, but you don't really know what the address is, right? So that's taught us then from each time the first thing we do, the first visit that we go to, we teach them their address. And then I had written down on a piece of paper for each child that they had to have it in their pocket every day when they went to school, because they all three went on a different bus. So they had their name, their address, their phone number, and so that if they missed the bus or did something, they could at least, show that to someone who was going to help them. And because it was terrifying when he just kind of passed out and was having a medical issue, and the kids were all there, and you had to just be in control of the situation so you didn't terrify them anymore. And then the other thing is, when there's kids, and the one other lady and we were talking to each other in English, and it kind of backfired on us. We didn't say anything bad, but they understood what we were talking about. We were saying something about that they should have taken the garbage out or something like that. And then he said something to us about it. And we were like, oh, so you understand English really well. when we thought he didn't speak English well at all. So just a little,
Well, that's a good point about often our mentees, our students, they comprehend more than they are able to say or speak.
yes.
And oftentimes you'll find, that's why, you need to encourage them, because oftentimes they are afraid, even if they know the words, they're afraid to say it because they don't want to make a mistake. They don't want to lose face. And they're afraid their pronunciation is off, or their accent is off, or their grammar is off. So yeah, it's critical. And we spend, oh my gosh, in the classroom setting, 6 to 8 weeks on personal information. We're constantly reviewing it. It's critical for many reasons. Our students who are going towards citizenship need to be able to verbally answer the question, what's your name, what's your address, birth date, do a lot of work with the calendar, and with money and numbers, and we would have them practice writing their name and address, and then we would have them transfer it to a Post-it, and we tell them to put the Post-it on a refrigerator, because if a paramedic or someone is coming to their apartment, or and then we talk about, 911, hello, I need ambulance. Doesn't have to be a complete sentence, and these are the kinds of communicative skills that are really, is so important to work on with your students. Yeah. Thinking about the Post-its, in doing work with vocabulary, when I actually was doing some individual tutoring, and we were working on the letter B, and I said, okay, I want you to, here's some Post-its, and walk around and put anything in your apartment that has a B word. And the next week she goes, yes, she goes, B. She goes, I put it on the broccoli and on my baby. I thought that was, she got the B, We had a good laugh about that one. So yeah, Post-its are very useful. And yeah, because our emergency situations, you can't rely on translators. At the agency, we have a 24-hour senior helpline, and there's about, I don't know, 17 or 18 different languages that the staff speaks. But then they also have a service with whatever language you're speaking. But if you're in your apartment and there's a medical emergency, it's, you're stuck, Again, students who don't have a lot of language, but you want to find out what they want, vocabulary, what they want to be able to talk about, you can just take some pictures of, like, a doctor's office or a bank, and just have them point, what do you need words on? What do you want to learn, how to do? I will just take 4 index cards, and on them I'll put a mouth, an ear, a book, and a pen, just simple. And then I put it on the table, and of course it represents speaking, listening, reading, writing. And then for low level, I'll have them point to, what is more important to you? What do you want to do? Do you want to write? Sometimes they'll say all 4. So then we will I'll have them draw some pictures, or I'll bring in some pictures under those categories. So again, under the mouth for speaking, they will talk about, emergency, or doctor, or teacher. So, okay, now we're going to work on vocabulary. So, talking to your child's teacher, or calling 911, There are situations where we still have to use the phone, apparently, so. Yeah, any other questions? I'm looking at our time. I think I don't want to hold anyone up.
Yes, and we want to be
Do I have a
respectful.
website? I will send Jenny, I think on the last slide, I put my phone and email on there. Did you see that, Jenny?
Oh, I didn't, but I think I can send it out in the email if you want people calling you. I know it probably will take you a moment to gather all that, so I would say just maybe by the week after next, maybe we'll get something out to everybody, because I took notes of every site you mentioned, but if you have links or other things you're going to put together, then go ahead and send those to me, Renee, and then I can compile
Okay.
everything for people.
Okay, great.
And I wrote down the emails that people put in the chat in case you were forwarded this invite, but I will make sure that everyone that was in the original email gets the materials, plus anyone that was in the chat box that put their email. I will include those. And I just really thank you, Renee, for sharing your expertise with all of us and
You're
for all of you
welcome.
that are on the call for wanting to learn and grow with your students and the families that you're working with. I appreciate all of you.
And I do as well. Thank you, everyone. It was a
Thank you.
pleasure. And I hope that you've learned a little something, and I'm continuing to learn. That's what, the best educators, we're continually learning, not only about our mentees, our students, but everything about education and teaching. And quite honestly, most of what I've learned is just through trial and error and from watching and observing expert teachers. So we all learn from each other as well. All right. Good
Thank you
luck,
very much.
Thank you,
everyone.
Renee.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Have a good evening.
Thank you.
All right. And if you have any questions, feel free to send me an email, drop me a line. I'd be happy to answer.